Hey MCARBO brother, I'm Chris Nelson, President of MCARBO. Really excited to introduce a new Mosin Nagant trigger spring kit for your Mosin Nagant firearm. A fantastic improvement. We really took this thing from literally the crate full of cosmoline, really did some great improvements to it internally, from a new and improved firing pin spring to polishing, sanding slightly some of the engagement surfaces. Really did a fine number on this thing. We even fixed this trigger. Now it's got a trigger return spring in there, whereas before it had absolutely nothing. So this is pretty exciting, feels phenomenal. We got about a 25% trigger pull reduction. We started with a 6 and some change, and we got it down to 4.5. So excited to see what you guys got. Really looking forward to this. I can't wait to hear the feedback on this new kit. And the polishing technique is really something. I'm excited about it. There's a lot of room for improvement here. Very easy to do. Looking forward to what you guys get for results. Let's jump on over to tabletop, put this baby in. Before we get started, let's go ahead and check our rifles together, make sure it's clear, check the chamber, check the bolt face, check the magazine well. This firearm's clear. Let's see what kind of factory trigger pull we're starting with. 6 pounds, 2.7 ounces. Let's take one more to confirm. 6 pounds, 1.5 ounces. Now these are old Russian military surplus rifles, so everybody's gonna have a different trigger pull, I guarantee that. You may have one up to 12 pounds to start with. We got pretty fortunate here with a 6 pound roughly starting trigger pull. Now before we get started, I just wanna go over a couple things. You notice right away there's a lot of trigger play right there. There is no trigger return spring in these Russian military surplus rifles. This one's actually from 1927. You can see it right here. And you can see all the Russian language here. Made in Russia, stamped here on the side. Just amazing, all the history that's involved with these rifles. I mean, these things are just, wow, they are ancient. You get to shoot a piece of history. Now it depends, you know, we want to make it fun and enjoyable to shoot with. These things are just designed to sling lead, that's it. I mean, you really have to do a couple things to it to really get it into some nice condition to make it an enjoyable, fun rifle to shoot. I mean, these are really cool. I enjoyed getting out to the range with this. You can pick them up for about 400 bucks, and probably less than that, I'm sure. Some of you guys comment what you got yours for. Also, starting trigger pulls. I'd love to hear what the variation is. We started with 6 pounds, but that's really light from what I've heard and what I've seen people start with, up to 12 pounds on these Mosins. So Mosin Nagant, really phenomenal antique that shoots really decent right out of the crate. Be prepared for a lot of cosmoline. When we first took this apart, it was just covered in it. And so have a few rags handy for sure. So I definitely want to reiterate that this trigger has got some real heavy side-to-side wobble. All right, a lot of slop forward and backward here. There's no trigger return spring in these surplus rifles. You see it just flops around all day long. So there's no real positive control or feeling as you're taking up that pre-travel. Now one thing I do want to point out is when you're pulling on that trigger, you'll notice that this cocking piece here is actually going to depress. All right, you can see right there. See that? That's due to how much sear engagement there is. All day long, look at that. So we're gonna actually do something about that, making this a much cleaner, smoother trigger pull. There we go. So it'll bounce all day long like a trampoline there. We're gonna actually correct that, and that's gonna be one of the big components for this trigger job. So it's gonna be a little more advanced. It's gonna be a little lengthy, but I'm looking forward to it. I mean, this is this is totally out of the norm from what we usually do, and I'm excited. I mean, this is definitely the oldest firearm I've ever worked on, 1927, fantastic. So we're coming up on 100 years here pretty soon. So as the trigger's pulled, it's pulling down on the Sear, which is like a leaf spring in here. It's spring steel, so it's a big long spring, and you'll notice here once we get it out, you'll see how they made up together. The Sear and the cocking piece, those two engagement surfaces, how they made up, that's what's causing all this spring-like action. So you'll see that springiness there. parts and tools needed for this build: the Mosin Nagant trigger spring kit by MCARBO, which also doubles as a tune-up kit. Really love this kit because we include a firing pin spring that's a heavy-duty, high-performance spring. It's going to help assist with ensuring you don't have any sort of light strikes or any sort of malfunctions. These are hard primers, that Russian ammo that this thing shoots, so it's good to replace that worn-out firing pin spring, especially if it's nearly 100 years old like mine is. Synthetic grease with PTFE, it's great for improved lubricity. It's also going to help in the installation of these shims. So we've got 2 trigger shims here, which will remove that side-to-side wobble. Then we've got a Sear spring shim here, which will help actually offset some of that distance between the engagement surface on the actual Sear and the cocking piece, which we'll get into here shortly. Then we got the 550 cord gut, which is really great and handy to have for the installation of this trigger return spring, which will eliminate that wobble there. Then you're going to need your bench block or a block of wood with a hole in it. Either one's fine. 3/32 inch punch, 1/16 inch punch, a hammer, flathead screwdriver, and as always, guys, make sure you're wearing iPro. Now, the last thing you might want to consider, this is optional, but a Dremel, and then our polishing kit. Our polishing kit comes with a 1/2 ounce can of Flitz gun polish. You've got microfiber towel, you've got your gloves, and you got your 3 felt bits, which you'll see here in a minute. We use that with the Dremel, really shines it up nice, really polishes the parts phenomenally. Now, also got schematics here for the Mosin. And you've got your trigger assembly schematic, your overall overview schematic, and your bolt schematic handy. You can download these off the website. Very useful tool to use as you're going through this, and a nice guide to help learn in the process. All right, let's jump into this. All right, we're gonna get started by removing the bolt and then the 2 barrel bands you'll see up here. You got your rear and your front barrel band. All right, so those are the things we're gonna do real quick. So go ahead and open your bolt all the way to the rear, pull down the trigger, pull the bolts right out. We'll set that aside for a minute. Now, I'm starting with the rear barrel band first. You're gonna push down on this spring right here. See that? All right. Now, the cool thing is you can push down, take your screwdriver, and just pop it over it to keep it compressed. All right, you see how it's holding tension just like that? Now I'm going to take this microfiber towel out of the polishing kit. It comes in handy, gives you some good grip. You don't really want to push this off with your screwdriver because you could really nick up all this wood here on the stock. So what we're going to do is take that towel and we're going to use it to get a good grip and push it all forward just like that. All right, now moving further up the barrel here, you can see I've got them both up here. Here's the front barrel band now. Taking my flathead screwdriver, pushing down on that spring. All right, and then I'm gonna shimmy it forward a little bit. It's gonna be snug, I tell you. All right, and then once it's captured that tension on that spring, you're good. Now you can take your towel, get a good grip, and just slide it up forward. You're gonna need that towel anyway, because there's probably gonna be a ton of cosmoline on this thing if this is the first time for you taking it apart. So like I said, have a little patience here. Boom, there we go. Front one's off, and now you've got to get that rear barrel band past the other spring. You just push down like so. Now you've got them both up here. You can also remove this cleaning rod if it helps. It's not completely necessary. I'm going to leave them both just like that. You're not going to be able to get them past the front sight because it's fixed here. Now these do have that little piece on the bottom where you can expand them, and that's where they're going to remain on the bottom of the stock when we put it back on. Just something to take notice of. Now that our barrel bands are off and they're hanging out up here with our front sight, we leave them there. This front handguard will just come right off like so. All right, now we're going to turn our Mosin upright so that we can separate the stock from the receiver barrel group. Now take your flathead screwdriver and remove this front takedown screw right here. That's where it locates there in the trigger guard. All right, so that's coming right out. This will be the short one. Set that aside. Now flip it around, and you're going to take out the other takedown screw, which is right here in the rear of the receiver. All right, hear that little clunk? That is the trigger guard coming out, just like so. Okay? Set the trigger guard aside. Take that screw, you can see it just fell right out. It's a long takedown screw in the rear that goes in the receiver there. Now we can separate our stock from the receiver barrel group. So go ahead and turn it upright and let that weight of that receiver barrel group just kind of do the work for you. And that stock comes off. This is a beautiful stock, by the way. Look at all that history. I mean, every little nick and scratch tells a story, I guarantee it. I'd love to get into this a little further, but not on this video. Let's keep rolling here, and the most important thing now is a trigger assembly. Let's dive into that and talk a little more about it. All right, let's do a more thorough review on how this trigger mechanism operates. So you can see here as the trigger is pulled, you can see this spring, which is the Sear leaf spring here. It's depressing the trigger's depressing that sear, and you can see a better view right here. Trigger moves forward, depresses that sear, and it drops. Alright, and that's what allows that firing pin to go forward. Now what we're running into here is the engagement surface on the cocking piece right here. Alright, and it's not quite 90. The angles are a little bit more than they need to be. Ideally, it'd be 90 degrees, the engagement surface between the two. So this engagement surface on the cocking piece and this engagement surface right here on the sear. Alright, so we want those to be 90, and when that trigger's pulled, it's dropping that sear. You can see the trigger's pulled going forward, the sear is going down. And it's that spring, leaf spring action right here. Okay, now that shim that we're going to install is going to actually increase the offset, the distance between this engagement surface on the sear and the cocking piece. So when that shim is installed, it's going to lower this sear, further separating it away from the actual engagement surface on the cocking piece, which is nice. We're not going to have to actually take any material off of that. Right? So we're going to just straighten up the angles a little bit with our silicon carbide sandpaper that comes with the kit, and we're also going to do some polishing to make it much more smoother, uniform, get rid of all those hills and valleys, right? All those microscopic hills and valleys on the machine parts. So that way there it's much more smooth, crisp, clean trigger pull. Alright, let's go ahead and disassemble this bolt and talk more about it. Alright, let's quickly run through the breakdown of the bolt. So here's the bolt body here, this is the cocking piece back here, and then the bolt head up front here with the guide rod connector that stretches the full length of it right here and intersects right here with the bolt head and the bolt body. And then the actual firing pin is on the inside with the spring, and then your extractor is right here. Now let's go ahead and disassemble the bolt. You can see it's in the cock position because the firing pin is recessed, it's not exposed. Now what we're going to do is we're going to rotate this cocking piece to this channel right here. That's it. You're not going to go this way. So just focus on this big channel here, get a good grip on it, and pull back on the cocking piece and rotate it just like that. Now it is uncocked because the firing pin is visible and you can feel it all loosen up. So the tension's gone and this thing will just fall apart on you. But let's take it apart gently so we can see how everything goes together, learn a little bit in the process. That way life will be easier when we put it back together. So we're taking the bolt head off, and you can see how the bolt head and this connector rod are actually married together a little bit here. And now we can rotate, unlock, pull it apart just like that. Alright, so when we go to put it back together, that's how it's going back together, one assembly just like that. And we can set it aside like so too, just to make life a little easier for now. Now this is all we've got left. So we're going to push down on the actual firing pin. If you've got your microfiber towel, go ahead and fold it up real good, push down on the table, and then we're going to start spinning this. Alright, now here's one cool thing. If it's a little bit snug, which it is right now, we're going to take that connector rod, and it also doubles as a tool, which is great. So you're going to actually disassemble using this connector rod on the firing pin like so. It's a wrench. Alright, so I'm actually just spinning the bolt to the left, and you can see how it's loosening up right there. You see how the threads are now exposed, the firing pin is coming out. So what we're going to do is just get it loose and then push back down on the table. You really got to push hard, compress that firing pin spring, and loosen it up like this. You're pulling the cocking piece right off just like that. That way there you got it under control. It's not going to fly away on you or hit you in the face. It's under a lot of pressure there, so it's best to get it started with the connector rod as that tool, that little wrench, and then push down on the table like we just did and loosen it that way. Here's the bolt body. Alright, here's our firing pin spring and our firing pin. Cool. And then our cocking piece, and this is the actual engagement surface right there that we're going to polish up, sand up a little bit. And it's not quite 90. You can see it's pitched forward a little bit, so we're actually going to fix that. Alright, now this is where the fun begins. So we're actually going to start doing a little bit of surface prep here on the actual engagement surface right here on the cocking piece. This is the most crucial part of it right here. So the goal is to make it a 90 if possible. We're not going to do anything drastic, just small minor touch-ups here. So we're going to go ahead and open up our trigger spring kit for the Mosin. Now this is also more like a tune-up kit because it's got so many other components that are going to do so many things to help take that performance to the next level. You can see it all coming apart here. So we've got our firing pin spring, alright, we've got our synthetic grease with PTFE, okay, then we've got our 1000 grit silicon carbide sandpaper. Alright, this is phenomenal stuff. It's really going to help make those subtle changes that we need. And then we've got another bag in here with some other components which are really helpful. To begin, a custom designed trigger return spring just for the Mosin. All right, so this is phenomenal. We're going to have a nice trigger return. It's not going to just be wobbly. This is 550 cord gut, which is really strong. It helps assist with the installation of the actual trigger return spring. And then we've got two sets of shims here. You've got smaller shims here, which are for the trigger, for the side-to-side wobble. Sear spring shims, 11 thousandths worth of adjustment each, so 22 thousandths in adjustment right there, which is great. And then we've got our 16 thousandths shims. Now you may have to sand these a little bit if it's too thick, and we'll go over that here in a second, but obviously the silicon carbide sandpaper, this is for sanding metal, so that's a nice thing. If we do have to sand these just a little bit, which I had to do, that's fine. It's not going to be a big issue, and it's precise. It's going to get you right in. It's better to be able to take a little off and have a perfect smooth fit than not have enough and it being too loose. And there's a lot of variation in the Mosin, so that's something else to consider, obviously, so we have to try to make it work for everything. All right, so I got silicon carbide sandpaper. I've even got my bench block here. I'm going to use that as a nice 90-degree surface. Any 90-degree surface will work, so whatever you got handy, as long as it's a good 90, that'll be helpful. And I just folded up my sandpaper there so that I can wedge it in here on the edge of this block. And then what we're going to do is take the actual cocking piece and that engagement surface. You can see it's well beyond 90. We want it to be straight up and down. You can see it's pitched forward like that. So what we're going to do is just run it back and forth on the block. All right, nice, subtle, tiny little adjustment. There we go. Awesome. And you can see that paper there. I mean, we're making some tiny adjustment, and that's where it's all about. We're not trying to put this on a grinder or anything like that. It'll take it off way too fast, and you can never put it back on. So that's something you always have to be concerned with, is small minor adjustments when we're doing any sort of sanding. You know, this is the only reason we're doing this is because we can get away with it on the Mosin. That's really it. I mean, if it was too much of a risk, there's no way we'd be saying, hey, get out the silicon carbide and start sanding away. All right, very minor, but it smoothed up that surface too. Gave it a nice luster, nice sheen, and that's the goal. So we're also going to polish this as well. And that did help. That did kind of change the angle slightly. All right, we're not trying to do anything drastic. No sander, no tools. It's all just handwork here, at least when we're doing the sanding. The polishing's fine. It's not abrasive. But obviously the silicon carbide sandpaper is abrasive. You don't want to take off too much material. You can't put it back on. That's looking good. Nice. Okay. Now let's put some polish on this and get it shined up real good. All right, now we're going to polish it up. I'm going to go ahead and open up the polishing kit. So obviously the microfiber towel comes with it, which is nice. And you got gloves, which are handy, really good, especially when we're doing all this work. You got these felt bits, which are phenomenal. These are for the Dremel. And then we also got the Flitz gun polish here. This is non-abrasive, so it's just going to smooth out that surface, make it exactly what we want. Something nice, clean, smooth. I mean, it'll get it to a high luster, which is amazing. So this bit drops right into the Dremel. You just got to lock right here, all right? So you drop it right in, right where you want it, tighten it on up. Any rotary tool will work. So Harbor Freight's got the really cheap rotary tool. You can go with that option as well. They're $8. If you got a Dremel, obviously this is the way to go. I'm just going to tighten it up just a little bit more. All right. Nice. So what we'll do is get some Flitz on the actual bit itself. All right, because I'm doing the video and I'm going back and forth here, I'm not going to put the gloves on right this second. But, you know, you're going to coat your bit. Then you're going to coat the actual part. We can shine up that whole surface there. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. That whole engagement component, that whole engagement piece, nothing wrong with it. Definitely make sure you're wearing eye pro, because this Flitz will start flying off. That is for sure. That's awesome. Man, this does such a massive amount of work for you. That rotary tool, I mean, you could do it by hand, but it would take a while. So the goal is to make this as efficient as possible. You know, we're doing an even investment of time here. We don't want to spend 3 days doing this. It's even starting to polish the some of the other pieces of the bolt. Yeah. All right. Wow, look at that. See how it looks like a piece of chrome, like a chrome wheel right there? That is phenomenal. Burr-free engagement surface. That's what we want. Like that high polish shine, man. You'll feel that, and that's where it is. So when you're pulling that trigger and you're like, oh man, this is amazing, just remember that's because you polished it. Smooth as glass. I mean, that is beautiful. I mean, that is like a chrome rim. I mean, that is like something you could polish up the wheels in your truck if you wanted to like that. Look at that, man. Oh, dang. That is nice. That's what it's all about. So that's what we're gonna keep doing right there, okay? This is amazing. All right, I'm excited. This is the kind of thing that I love to see because you can see the difference right before your eyes, and it didn't take long. It took literally like 3 minutes of the Dremel. So let's jump on to the other components here now. All right, so the last step here, removing the trigger and the sear from the receiver. Now we're gonna go ahead and just take notice of this wobble. It's nice to be able to remember what you started with. I mean, that is crazy how much slack and wobble there is. And then this front and back, there's no tension, there's nothing. And you may be able to get your pin out. Look how the pin's just walking out like that. So there you go. So we'll go ahead and remove that trigger hinge pin, set that aside. Now the trigger's still captured. We have to remove the sear. So go ahead and grab your flathead screwdriver. I'm gonna remove that sear screw right here. Now this could be pretty tight. You can use some heat if you need to get it loose. All right, so there's the sear screw right there. Go ahead and set that aside. And then you can see the trigger and the sear, how they come out. Right? That's how they'll be going back in. Okay? All right. So let's go ahead and take a good close look at those. Now we got our trigger, sear, cocking piece all in front of us here. Now as you're going through this, go ahead and wipe off all that cosmoline. I'm guaranteeing there's still some that I'm going to be discovering as I go through this, and I've had it apart a few times now. I mean, it just keeps showing up. All right, so let's demonstrate real quick how this looks when it's inside the firearm. So you've got, the cocking piece of the bolt where the engagement surface is on the sear right here. And as you pull on that trigger, it pulls down on that sear. You see that? So what we're doing, when we're shimming that sear, it's gonna start somewhere down here rather than way up here. There's less engagement surface, there's less travel for it to drop. So that means less trigger pull. All right, so that's the nice thing. We can understand the concept as we're going through this. So we're shimming up here so that we can start somewhere down here in the middle of the cocking piece, and then we're smoothing up these surfaces so that when we do pull on the trigger, it's a much more cleaner, crisper trigger pull. All right, so I got my bench block, which is my 90 degree, and then I've got my silicon carbide sandpaper here, and then I've got the sear engagement surface. So we're only modifying the backside right here, all right? And there is a little trick. If you did screw it up, you can always reduce the thickness here, and that'll add more engagement area, like we just talked about, on the cocking piece and the sear. Because you've decreased this thickness, it'll allow it to go up higher. But we don't want to mess with that, and we're not going to get into that. We're not going to screw this up. We're doing it by hand with some sandpaper. So we're not making any drastic changes. We're just smoothing it out, and making it much more clean and uniform. And small little movements. So I've got it positioned just like that. You can see I've got it squared up. All right, even pressure, small movements. Nice. All right, take your time. You have to slide your sandpaper around a little bit. Remember, we're only doing up here. We're not doing down here. So try to offset a little bit if needed. All right. See how I've got that little bit of gap? I'm only doing really the edge there, the top edge. And I'm keeping it square. I'm keeping it flat. And I'm keeping the pressure uniform. Very small side-to-side movement. It's easier to maintain and be consistent that way. All right, I'm going to switch up my paper a little bit. All right, now let's go ahead and take a good look at it. You can tell I did a little more sanding on this piece. That's okay. You can do that. All right, look at that. Nice. See that? Already cleaning up. Now we don't want to round this edge. You want this edge to stay nice and sharp. So leave it as so. Now we're going to polish the rest of it. I'm not going to bother sanding that. I don't want to change the angle or the geometry. All I'm doing is just making this face a little smoother and a little straighter. Nice. All right, I'm good with that. And that's it. That's all you need to do. You don't need to do any more than that to get some good noticeable results. Now it's on to polishing. So a tiny, tiny bit of sanding is all we did. Nothing crazy, no tools, don't go overboard. Remember, you can take it off, but you can't put it back on. Let's go ahead and polish this a little bit. You can feel it heat up too. All that friction. I mean, that's pretty amazing. You can do this by hand if you want, but it's going to take some time. The Dremel rotary tool really helps speed up this process. You can already see some of that sheen coming in there. That's the way to do it right there. I'm definitely a big fan of the Dremel and polishing. I mean, this is real easy to do. This is that fine detailed work. You know, this isn't something that is going to be done at the factory. I mean, it's just not. Oh man, that's nice. That's coming along there. Probably one more round and we'd be good. Whew, that's hot. Yeah, that's a good sign. All right, we're making some changes here. Nice. That's what we want right there. See that? That is smooth. Oh man, you can feel the difference too. That's nice. That is exactly what we want. Look at that. It's like one smooth, uniform piece now rather than a grainy, grimy surface like the ridges of your knuckles. And that's what makes a trigger feel so crappy when you feel that grittiness. It's because you're feeling like those burrs, those knuckles, those machining lines, marks. And in something like this, it's mass produced, yeah, you're gonna have it. You're not gonna have this beautifully machined precision work here. It just takes too much time. Nobody's gonna do it. Fortunately, you can. Look at that. Man, I'm stoked about this. That's awesome. All right, let's keep moving on here. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and insert our sear and our trigger at the same time. Now take your sear shims, coat them in synthetic grease with PTFE. It helps them stick together. Now that's only if you're gonna take the maximum trigger pull reduction, use both. If you wanna just get kind of a medium in between reduction, just use one. Then you're gonna take your trigger, position it like so, right? You're gonna drop it right in like that. And you're also gonna take your sear and drop it right in as well. Now the sear needs to insert into the trigger like that because they are dependent on one another, all right? And now what you're gonna do is pay close attention to this sear. This tab needs to stay in contact with this portion of the receiver. It needs to stay here, right? It needs to stay on this side. Just like this portion of the sear is captured underneath the receiver, this portion of the sear needs to be captured underneath the receiver. Very important, very critical. So we'll go ahead and make sure, yes, it's captured, good. Drop our sear screw in place, and you want to grab those threads by hand first. So we're going to compress it, and we're going to start turning that screw, looking for those threads. The whole point of that is so that we don't cross thread it by accident. You don't want to screw that up. Now we take our flathead screwdriver and tighten it down, also checking again to make sure that this portion of the sear is on the same plane as the other end of the sear so that we have that nice spring motion. It has to be captured. All right, good. Tighten it right up, good and snug. The sear is in the proper position. You got a tiny bit of overhang here with that shim. Not a big deal. It's not going to impact the operation of the firearm. And good and snug. All right, now we can go ahead and install those shims and that trigger return spring. Now let's go ahead and install our shims on the trigger to see if they need to be adjusted first. So you take some of that synthetic grease, works really good to help pick these up, all right, and coat them so that they stick to the inside of that trigger housing to thread part of the way in. And then take your hinge pin to push that punch through. That punch works as a useful guide. All right, so I got one in there and captured. Now I'm going to take the other shim. It's coated with that grease to really help with the lubricity and also help keep it from just falling through. So I'm going to take my punch and I'm going to grab that opening. I can see a small opening there. So I'm going to grab that shim, just kind of push it in the right direction. And now I'm going to push that pin, that hinge pin, all the way through. All right, good. So that's the process for installing the shims. But now we just need to make sure we got, wow, look at that. So it really did eliminate a ton of that side-to-side wobble. Now we want to make sure we didn't impact any of the function. That's pretty dang good. That's exactly what you want. It's nice and smooth. Could be slightly smoother, but that's really good. I mean, that's not going to impact any of the function. It's not going to add anything to the grittiness of the trigger pull. It's very subtle. That's really nice. But for demonstration purposes, I'm going to go ahead and punch out that shim. Just in case you do need to make an adjustment, you need to know what to do. So we'll go ahead and push that pin back out. Now we'll grab our shims. There's one. And two. And then we'll go ahead and just sand them down a little bit on this silicon carbide sandpaper. This stuff is great for making minor adjustments. You're not going to make any extreme adjustment. You're going to really just smooth out any burrs that there might be on the shim, and you'll take a little bit of that thickness off, which will put you right in that sweet spot. I mean, this is perfect. Now there's so much variation on these Mosins. I mean, they've mass produced. It's hard to make a lot of precision parts for something like this. So a little bit of sanding comes with the territory. The good thing is it's possible and it's doable. You can get a very nice custom trigger job. It just takes a little time, a little patience, but well worth it. Very gratifying too, I will say. I do enjoy this probably the most because the night and day effect is so extreme. I mean, there's so many things that you're correcting at one time. Really can't beat it. So that's it. You're just really smoothing those shims out, getting them to the point that it's going to be the perfect forward-backward motion, and make sure you've got enough side-to-side play taken up. You know, it shouldn't be any play. It should be nice and solid. Go ahead and wipe these shims off. All right, now take synthetic grease. Same thing. Pick them up, get them coated in grease. Now we're going to drop them right in. All right, I've got one on one side. Take that hinge pin, get it started. Also helps too if you look down inside, you can see where it's all going, and you can push down on your bench block as well, so you got that little counter pressure as you're steering the operation here. All right, and then use the weight of the receiver to actually push that hinge pin through, which is really nice. Now I'm going to slide this one in. You can see it coming right through there. Line it up. Use the weight of that. There you go. Perfect. Nice. All right, we're in there. Great. Nice. And that's what we can hope for right there. Look at that. All that side to side, virtually gone. You do need a little clearance, obviously, so you don't have any grinding grittiness. We don't want to cause any problems, but that's really, really nice. Really smooth already. So we're going to actually put the trigger return spring in there now. so that we can get some good positive back and forth engagement when we pull that trigger. Now we're going to install the trigger return spring, and the way it's going in there, this little leg is going to be bent in, right? And this other leg that's bent up, this is how it's going to be positioned. Okay? So that leg that's bent in is going to be resting on the sear like so, and that leg that's bent up is going to be placed on the trigger. So what we need to do is thread that 550 cord gut through the coils just like so, and you're going to be pulling back just like that. All right, the leg that's up right here, leg that's going to be resting on the actual sear itself right here. Okay, push through on this hinge pin. Try not to disturb those shims that are in there. Do your best. I mean, it's not the end of the world. You can always reposition them with your punch. All right, here you go. So now get some good solid pressure on it. Okay, it's going to be sliding through. Now you want to keep this leg, bottom leg, on top of the sear. It's going to try to jump off on you like that. Take your punch and just get it back up on there, because we're starting to get some tension on it, so it's trying to squirm away. Okay. Alright, that's pretty well in position there. So I'm going to start using my punch to guide that hinge pin back through. And I'm also making sure that the shim is still in position as well. And I can see both shims are in position, right? I got the hinge pin back in. Now I just pull the 550 cord gut through, just like that. And, oh man, yes! Now we've got a trigger return spring in there. Feels like a real trigger almost. Heck yeah. Awesome. Now here's the components you should have here in front of you. Put the bolt back together. The bolt body, cocking piece, firing pin spring. We got two of them. We're about to replace one. Your guide rod connector and your bolt head. Now this factory firing pin spring is really old and it's likely worn out. If you're having light strikes or anything like that, this is why. And you can see there's a major difference here between the factory spring and the new MCARBO heavy duty firing pin spring. Massive difference. So this is much more reliable. We're going to replace it. We're going to put the MCARBO heavy duty firing pin spring in there. Alright, there we go. So we'll go ahead and insert that into the bolt body. And we will get our cloth here, and we're going to push down and compress that spring, and we're going to twist on the cocking piece like so. Alright, at least get it going, get it started. And the goal is to get it flush and get it lined up. Alright, but one good thing is we've got this wrench right here, which is super handy to help finish it the rest of the way. Alright, perfect. So I've got it flush and I've got it in line with that mark, right? And that's how it came from the factory, so we want it to stay the same. Right on. Now this is the uncocked position. This is where you want to be right here, and we're going to insert the rest of the components. So we're going to slide on the guide rod connector and the bolt head. Now the guide rod connector and the bolt head go together real easy. Alright, this little notch right here locates right there, and then it turns. Okay, looks just like that. And this little notch right here is going to locate on that engagement surface of the cocking piece. Alright, that surface that we polished. So they slide together just like that. Alright, then they rotate up here. You can see how they're locked right here and here. Alright, it's all locked together. Now we're going to go ahead and turn the cocking piece. Put it in the cocked position. Boom. Look at that. It's all flat, one flush, solid piece, ready to go. Firing pin's recessed, cocked position. And it's all secure and tight, ready to go back into the firearm, which is exactly what we're going to do right now. We're going to check it out before we go any further. Alright, now that we got the bolt back together, let's go ahead and slide it into the receiver just to test the function really quick. And I want to get a good, nice, up-close view of how this cocking piece interacts with the trigger. I'm going to try to pull the trigger here Get a feel for it as well. It's kind of awkward right now without the stock. Nice, much cleaner. Okay, that's right there. And hopefully you can get a good view how it's interacting with the trigger pull and that cocking piece. Not bad. Wow. All right, way less movement here. It wasn't like you're pulling for days like it was before. All right, let's get this back in the stock, do the trigger pull reading. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and drop the stock onto the barrel and receiver group. You got the trigger pointing straight up in the air. All right, go ahead and put the trigger through that hole there. Now the barrel bands are on the end of this stock, so you're gonna have to get those up and over. If you still have the cleaning rod there like I do, you're just gonna have to get them up and over. Not a big deal. Now we're gonna leave the bands just like that for right this second. We're not gonna go ahead and worry about the handguard just yet. Now we'll go ahead and take our trigger guard and drop that right into place. And then we'll take our forward takedown screw, the short one, and drop that right in and go ahead and get it started. We're not gonna crank it down for days. We just wanna get it good and snug. Okay, good and snug. Now we're gonna flip it around. We're going to get the rear takedown screw right in place. Pressing down on the table here on that trigger guard. All right. Trying to get it even and snug. There we go. Those barrel bands are rattling down there. All right, I'm just evening it up. Okay, good. Sweet. All right, now for the finishing touch, the handguard. Now go ahead and drop on the handguard, line it up. Now we're gonna go ahead and put the barrel bands back in place. Remember, those partitions are gonna stay on the bottom. Grab your rag and go ahead and push them all the way back, lock them in place. All right, nice. Yes, good stuff, back together. All right, let's test this trigger pull. All right, now let's see what kind of modified trigger pull we got. Woo, nice, 4 pounds, 8 ounces. All right, let's take one more to confirm. 4 pounds, 2.7 ounces. Phenomenal. Mosin Nagant, that is really impressive for an old, antique, mass-produced firearm. Phenomenal. Now as a bonus, we're gonna quickly finish the crown. We're just gonna lap it a little bit, make sure it's nice and clean. All right, so we've got some medium grit, silicon carbide compound here. This is phenomenal stuff. This is gonna help get rid of all that pitting and all those micro burrs on the end of the barrel right there. So real simple process. You just take your brass bit, you chuck it up, you get some of the silicon carbide on the bit. And then right into the muzzle, and it's gonna lap and finish that crown. Make sure there's no burrs or anything obstructing that bullet as it leaves the muzzle. Medium pressure, medium speed. Oh yeah, it doesn't take a whole lot of time to get the results. Go ahead and add a little bit more. Wow, look at that. Beautiful. Nicely shined up and clean. Just phenomenal. That is so easy and simple and such a critical thing for a nearly 100-year-old firearm like this. I mean, you can imagine, yeah, must have. So I'm glad we did that quick little bonus. That's something else you can do to clean this firearm up. Phenomenal. Well, there you have it, guys. A 25% trigger pull reduction with some really modest polishing and sanding. We didn't even really go that in depth with it. I mean, we did the bare minimum. So it all depends on what you do with it. Obviously, keep it safe, keep it within practical range. But if you're starting with a 12-pound trigger, you've got a lot of room of improvement there. We started with a 6, so there's not a whole lot that we really need at that point. I mean, the 4-pound trigger is really something. I mean, this is definitely, that's it, man. Before, it was just a monster. I mean, this is much more fun to shoot, not to mention there's no side-to-side wobble, hardly any at all, and we got that trigger return spring in there. It feels like a real trigger, more modern. Had to bring it up into the 21st century, I suppose. I mean, this is much better. These are fun. I really like the Mosin. Big fan. Really affordable, and it's like shooting a piece of history. You get to actually take this antique and go have fun with it, which now, a little bit more of a real shooter. You got a nice, consistent trigger pull. So that is a big bonus, making this a much more desirable item to take with you to the range, not just sit in the safe and collect dust. So it's kind of cool. I'm looking forward to your feedback, obviously. I can't wait to hear what you guys do with this. And yeah, thank you for the ideas. Obviously, MCARBO Brotherhood, you guys have been phenomenal. This one was a big one. I know a few of you guys kept pushing, kept asking. That's the name of the game. You just keep asking us, we're gonna make it, we're gonna do it, which is kind of been the whole thing, man. This has been the whole point of the MCARBO Brotherhood, us getting together, listening to you guys, enjoying that feedback, even if it's sometimes, you know, the constructive stuff. But we do listen to you guys. I'm having a lot of fun with this. This was a great new experience for me. I mean, I hadn't worked on anything from 1927. So, phenomenal. I'm excited, guys. Thank you very much. As always, happy shooting.